When the grieving Alpha King desperately searches the kingdom for someone to nurse his dying heir, he never expected the trembling Omega Baker's daughter to not only save his son's life, but awaken a forbidden mate bond that could destroy his throne. As ancient bloodlines clash with royal duty, and Kira's hidden heritage threatens to unravel everything they thought they knew about destiny, one question remains. Can an Alpha King choose love over law when the fate of his kingdom hangs in the balance? The baby's screams cut through the castle like broken glass, making even the bravest guards step back from the nursery door. King Darius pressed his face against the cold stone wall, his hands shaking as another wet nurse ran from the room, tears streaming down her face. This was the fifth one this week. "Your Majesty, we must do something," whispered Marcus, the king's best friend and helper. "Prince Asher hasn't eaten properly in 3 days. He's getting weaker." Darius wanted to punch something, anything. His wife Celine had died bringing their son into the world just 1 month ago. Every time he looked at baby Asher, he saw her beautiful face. Every time the baby cried, his heart broke all over again. The sadness inside him felt like a wild animal, growling and snapping at anyone who came near. "The wet nurses say your wolf is too angry," Marcus said carefully. "They can feel it when they try to feed the prince. It scares them away." The king knew this was true. His other half, the wolf that lived inside him, was filled with pain and rage. When strangers touched his son, the wolf wanted to attack. But without someone to feed baby Asher, the tiny prince would die. Darius couldn't lose his wife and his son too. Outside, snow fell heavy and thick, covering the kingdom in white silence. The people in the villages below were starting to whisper. Their new prince was sick, and their king was lost in grief. What would happen to them all? "There has to be someone," Darius said, his voice rough. "Someone who isn't afraid." Marcus looked out the window at the snowy village below. "What about the Omegas, Your Majesty?" Darius's wolf snarled at the idea. Omegas were the weakest of their kind. They worked in kitchens and cleaned houses. They weren't supposed to touch royal babies. But as another cry echoed from the nursery, desperation began to win over pride. "Find me every Omega woman in the kingdom who has milk to give," he commanded. "I don't care about their bloodline or their job. My son needs food and he needs it now." As Marcus hurried away to spread the word, Darius returned to the nursery. Baby Asher lay in his golden crib, so small and pale. His little fists waved weakly in the air, and his cries had become softer, more tired. The king reached down with one large finger to touch his son's tiny hand. "I won't let you die," he promised. "I'll find someone to take care of you, no matter what it costs." But deep in his heart, a cold fear grew. What if no one could help? What if his grief had made him too dangerous to let anyone near his child? The wolf inside him howled with pain, and somewhere in the distant villages, an answer was coming that would change everything. Down in Moonridge Village, Kira Moonwhisper kneaded bread dough with flour-covered hands, trying to ignore the whispers of the other baker girls. Her heart still ached from losing her own baby girl just 6 weeks ago, and her body still made milk with nowhere to go. The other workers pretended to be kind, but she heard what they really thought. "Poor Kira," they said when she couldn't hear. "Omega girls like her aren't meant to keep their babies anyway." The royal messenger's voice boomed across the market square, making everyone stop their work. By order of King Darius, all Omega women who can nurse are called to the castle. The prince needs help, and the king will pay well. Kira's hands froze in the dough. The other girls looked at each other with excited faces, but fear filled Kira's stomach. She had heard the terrible stories about the king. People said his grief had made him wild and dangerous. Wet nurses ran from the castle crying, too scared to even talk about what happened. "You should go," said Maya, the head baker, pushing Kira toward the door. "You need the money, and you're the only one here with milk to give." Kira's small house had holes in the roof, and she had no family left to help her. The coins from the king could fix everything, but the thought of facing the scary Alpha made her hands shake. "What if he hurts me?" she asked. "What if you save the prince?" Maya replied. "Think about it, Kira. That baby up there is crying just like yours did. Maybe you can help him." The walk to the castle took 2 hours through thick snow. Kira's old boots had holes that let in cold water, and her thin coat did little to stop the freezing wind. By the time she reached the great doors, her teeth were chattering and her fingers were blue. Inside, the castle felt heavy with sadness. Dark paintings covered the walls, and servants moved like ghosts through the halls. Other Omega women sat on benches, waiting their turn to meet the king. One by one, they went into a big room and came out crying. "He's a monster," sobbed one woman as she ran past. "His eyes glow like fire, and you can feel his anger in the air." Kira almost left then, almost grabbed her thin coat and ran back to her safe little house. But then she heard it, a baby's cry that sounded exactly like her daughter's had, sad and hungry and desperate for love. When the guards called her name, Kira stood on shaking legs and walked toward the throne room. The huge doors opened with a loud creak, and there he was. King Darius sat on a throne made of black stone, holding a tiny bundle against his chest. He was bigger than any man she had ever seen, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes like storm clouds. The baby in his arms cried weakly, and the sound made Kira's heart break. "Another Omega," the king said, his voice deep and tired. "They all run away. Why should you be different?" Kira stepped forward, even though her knees felt like water. "Because I know what it's like to lose a child, Your Majesty. And I know what it sounds like when a baby needs help." For the first time, the king's angry expression changed. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his storm cloud eyes softened just a little. "You lost a child?" "6 weeks ago. A little girl." Kira's voice was barely a whisper, but in the quiet throne room, everyone could hear. "I still have milk, and I still have love to give." Maybe that's what Prince Asher needs most. The king studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he stood up and walked down the steps toward her. Kira wanted to run, but she forced herself to stay still. When he held out the crying baby, she could see how scared he was too. "Don't hurt him," he said, and his voice cracked like a boy's instead of a king's. Kira took the tiny prince in her arms, and something magical happened. Baby Asher stopped crying. His little eyes, as blue as his father's, looked up at her face and seemed to smile. Without thinking, Kira began to hum an old song her grandmother had taught her. The king stepped back in shock, but he didn't take his son away. For the first time in weeks, the castle was quiet, except for Kira's gentle voice and the soft sounds of a baby finally at peace. The castle kitchen buzzed with morning chaos, but Kira barely noticed the clatter of pots and rushing servants. Prince Asher nestled against her chest, finally peaceful after another sleepless night. She hummed softly while stirring porridge with one hand. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb like he never wanted to let go. "You shouldn't be working in here," Sarah, the head cook, whispered, glancing nervously toward the doorway. "The other servants are talking. They say it's not proper for the prince's nurse to do kitchen work." Kira shrugged, adjusting the sling that held Asher close to her heart. "Idle hands make me worry too much. Besides, he likes the warm smells and gentle sounds. Look how calm he is." The baby cooed softly, his bright blue eyes tracking the dancing flames in the great hearth. For the first time since arriving at the castle, Kira felt useful beyond just feeding the child. The familiar rhythm of chopping vegetables and kneading bread reminded her of home, of the bakery she'd left behind. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Every servant froze as King Darius appeared in the doorway, his massive frame filling the entrance. His dark hair was disheveled, his royal clothes wrinkled from another sleepless night, pacing the halls. "Where is my son?" His voice carried the edge of panic that had become all too familiar. "Right here, Your Majesty." Kira turned slowly, revealing the contentedly sleeping baby. "He ate well this morning and has been calm for 2 hours." The king's shoulders sagged with relief. He stepped closer, and Kira caught the scent that made her wolf stir restlessly. Pine forests, winter storms, and something uniquely powerful that called to every instinct she tried to ignore. "He looks peaceful," Darius said quietly, reaching out to brush a finger against his son's soft cheek. "I haven't seen him sleep this deeply since his mother died." Kira finished gently when the king's words failed him. Babies sense emotions more than we realize. When you're calm, he feels safe. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Kira's breath caught as she recognized the golden flecks in his dark gaze, the way his wolf seemed to call to hers despite every law that made such connection impossible. "You're not like the others," he said, his voice rougher now. "The previous nurses were afraid of him, afraid of me. But you, I lost a baby too," Kira whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I know what it feels like when the crying stops, when the silence becomes more frightening than any sound." The king's hand stilled against his son's face. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. It was early in the pregnancy. Most people didn't even know I was expecting." She looked down at Prince Asher, sleeping so trustingly in her arms. "Maybe that's why I understand him. We've both lost mothers." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Other servants had begun to creep back into the kitchen, but they kept their distance, sensing something important happening near the hearth. "Stay close to the castle today," the king said suddenly, his tone shifting back to royal command. "There have been reports of rogues near the village." Kira nodded, though something in his eyes suggested the danger wasn't just from outsiders. The way he looked at her made her skin tingle with awareness she had no right to feel. As the day wore on, Kira found herself drawn to the castle's upper floors. Prince Asher seemed to enjoy the change of scenery, gurgling happily as she showed him portraits of his ancestors and pointed out birds through tall windows. "That's your great-grandfather," she told the baby, stopping before a painting of a fierce-looking man with the same dark hair as his father. "He united 3 packs and built this castle to protect them all. He also took 5 wives and started 2 wars over territory disputes," came a dry voice from behind her. Kira spun around to find King Darius watching them from the corridor entrance. He changed into fresh clothes, but his hair still held that disheveled look that made him seem more human than royal. "I didn't mean to wander into private areas," she said quickly. "The baby seemed restless, and I thought, it's fine." He stepped closer, studying his ancestor's portrait. "These halls have been too quiet since Celine died. It's good to hear life in them again." They walked together down the portrait gallery, the king pointing out various relatives while Asher dozed peacefully between them. The afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows painted rainbow patterns across the stone floors. "Tell me about your family," Darius said as they paused near a window overlooking the gardens. "Your pack." Kira shifted uncomfortably. "There's not much to tell. My parents died when I was young. I've been working at the bakery since I was 12, trying to save enough to maybe travel someday." "No other family? No mate waiting for you?" The question made her cheeks burn. "No, Your Majesty. I was engaged briefly, but he decided an Omega without family connections wasn't worth the trouble." Something dangerous flashed in the king's eyes. He was a fool. The simple words hit her like a physical blow. No one had ever defended her before, had ever suggested she might be worth something beyond her Omega status. "Your Majesty, I should return to the nursery. Prince Asher will need feeding soon." But as she turned to leave, his hand caught her wrist gently. The touch sent fire racing up her arm, and she gasped at the intensity of it. "Kira," her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "I want you to know what you're doing for my son, for this castle. It matters more than you realize." She looked up into his face, seeing past the crown and royal bearing to the grieving father beneath. "He's easy to love, Your Majesty. Any mother would feel blessed to care for him. But you're not just any mother, are you?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications that made her heart race and her wolf whine with longing. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed in the corridor, and they sprang apart like guilty children. The great hall thundered with raised voices as Elder Magistrate Thorne slammed his fist against the council table. 3 weeks! 3 weeks this! This Omega has been living in our sacred halls, touching the air with her common hands. Kira pressed herself against the stone pillar. Prince Asher clutched protectively to her chest as she listened to the heated debate. She shouldn't be here, shouldn't be eavesdropping, but the baby had been fussy and she'd hoped a walk might soothe him. "The child is thriving." King Darius's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "For the first time since his birth, my son is healthy and growing. that matters more than your precious protocols. It matters nothing if she's corrupting him with Omega weakness. Thorn shot back. Already the servants whisper that she sings to him in the old tongue, fills his head with common folk tales instead of proper royal education. Kira's blood ran cold. The lullabies her grandmother had taught her, the stories that made Asher smile, they saw even that as wrong. He's 6 weeks old, another council member said with disgust. What proper education does an infant need beyond noble blood and strong leadership? Leadership he'll never learn from an Omega wet nurse who treats him like her own child instead of our future king. The words hit like physical blows. Kira looked down at Asher, who gazed up at her with such trust, such love. Had she overstepped? Was her care truly harming him? Enough. The king's voice dropped to a deadly quiet that somehow commanded more attention than shouting. The discussion is closed. She stays. Heavy footsteps approached her hiding place. Kira held her breath, pressing deeper into the shadows. But King Darius appeared around the pillar as if he'd known exactly where she was. "How much did you hear?" he asked quietly. "Too much." She shifted Asher to her shoulder. Using the movement to wipe away tears she refused to let fall. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not what's best for him. Look at me. His command was gentle but firm. When she raised her eyes to his, she saw fierce protectiveness burning there. They're afraid. Of me? I'm nobody, Your Majesty. Just a baker's helper who lost everything. That's exactly why they're afraid. You have nothing left to lose, which means you can't be bought, threatened, or controlled. You care for my son because you choose to, not because you hope to gain something from it. His words wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket, but doubt still gnawed at her confidence. What if they're right about the corruption? What if I'm making him weak? Come with me. He led her up winding stairs to a tower room she'd never seen before. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating shelves lined with ancient books and scrolls. The air smelled of old parchment and dried herbs. "This was my mother's study," he said, lighting several candles. "She died when I was 7, but I still remember her voice when she read to me from these books." Kira looked around in wonder. Many of the texts were written in the old language, the same tongue she used in her lullabies. The council called her corrupting too, Darius continued, running his fingers along leather-bound spines. Said she filled my head with Omega nonsense about compassion and mercy, instead of proper Alpha authority. Your mother was an Omega? The strongest woman I ever knew. She could calm a room full of arguing Alphas with a single look, heal wounded hearts with her stories, and make grown warriors weep with her songs. He pulled a book from the shelf, its pages yellowed with age. These are the stories she told me, the same ones you sing to my son. Kira's throat tightened as she recognized the familiar tales written in her grandmother's careful script. How did you know? The melody you hummed yesterday. The Silver Wolf's Journey. My mother sang it to me during thunderstorms. They stood in comfortable silence, surrounded by the wisdom of generations. Prince Asher had fallen asleep in Kira's arms, his tiny face peaceful in the candlelight. The council wants to send you away, Darius said finally. Fear shot through her like ice. When? Tomorrow. They've arranged for a proper, noble-born wet nurse from the Eastern Territories, Lady Cordelia of House Sterling. I see. Kira forced her voice to remain steady even as her heart shattered. Of course, that's what's best for Prince Asher. Is it? He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. You tell me, Kira, will a stranger who sees him as a political opportunity love him the way you do? Will she sit up all night when he has bad dreams? Will she sing the songs that make his wolf feel safe? Tears finally spilled over despite her efforts to hold them back. It doesn't matter what I want. I'm just an Omega. You're the woman who saved my son's life. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning that made her chest ache with longing. She wanted to lean into his strength, to let him shield her from the world's cruelty, but that path led only to heartbreak. A commotion in the courtyard below drew their attention to the windows. Torches bobbed in the darkness as riders approached at dangerous speed. Rogues, Darius breathed, his body instantly shifting to battle readiness. They've attacked the village. The night exploded into chaos as alarm bells rang throughout the castle. Guards rushed to defensive positions while servants scurried to secure the keep. In the distance, orange flames licked at the sky where homes burned. "Stay here," the king commanded, already moving toward the door. "Bar it behind me and don't open it for anyone but me." "Wait," Kira caught his arm, surprised by her own boldness. "Be careful, please." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise. Gratitude. Something deeper that made her pulse race. For one impossible moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he pressed a quick kiss to his sleeping son's forehead and disappeared into the corridor, leaving her alone with fears that went far deeper than rogue attacks. Because somewhere in the space of a few stolen moments, she'd realized a terrible truth. She was falling in love with a king who could never be hers, and tomorrow she would lose both him and the child who'd become her whole world. The sound of steel rang through the night as battle cries echoed from the courtyard, and Kira clutched Prince Asher closer, whispering the old protective prayers her grandmother had taught her, never knowing that her words carried more power than any sword. The midnight wind howled through the castle like a wounded beast as Kira stumbled through the rose garden, clutching a crumpled letter against her chest. Her bakery was gone, burned to nothing but ash and memories. The villagers whispered it was punishment for consorting with royalty, for daring to touch what didn't belong to her kind. Now she truly had nowhere left to run. "Why are you crying?" Prince Asher's sleepy voice drifted from her arms. Even at 3 months old, he seemed to sense her pain. His tiny fingers reached up to catch her tears, and Kira's heart shattered all over again. She'd failed everyone, her dead parents, her lost baby, and now this precious child who depended on her. "Mama's just sad, little prince," she whispered, using the word that felt both right and wrong. She wasn't his real mother, no matter how much her heart claimed him. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path behind her. Kira spun around to find King Darius approaching through the moonlit garden, his usually perfect royal clothes rumpled and his dark hair wild. His golden eyes blazed with an emotion she couldn't name. "The fire wasn't an accident," he said without greeting. "My spies confirmed it. Someone wanted to trap you here." Kira's blood turned to ice. Who would do such a thing? People who fear what they don't understand. Darius moved closer, and she caught his scent pine forests and thunderstorms. It made her wolf whimper with dangerous longing. People who see how Asher thrives with you and worry about what that means. The baby gurgled happily, reaching for his father. Darius took him gently, and Kira watched the transformation that happened every time. The fierce alpha king melted into a devoted father, all sharp edges softened by love. "I should leave," Kira said, though every fiber of her being rebelled against the words. "Take Asher somewhere safe, away from the politics and schemes." "No." The word came out harsh, desperate. Darius stepped so close, she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You can't take him. I won't let you." "Then what?" Kira's voice cracked. "I'm just an Omega baker. I have no money, no family, no power. I can't protect him from whatever's coming." Something flickered in Darius's eyes, pain so deep it took her breath away. "You protected him from me?" he said quietly. "When I was drowning in grief and rage, when my wolf was more beast than man, you saved us both." The truth hung between them like a bridge neither dared cross. Kira felt it too, the invisible thread that seemed to connect her heart to his, the way her wolf sang whenever he was near. But fairy tales didn't happen to girls like her. "Your Majesté?" "Darius," he interrupted. "When it's just us, call me Darius." The name felt forbidden on her tongue, sweet and dangerous. "Darius, you have duties. A kingdom to think about. You can't..." "Can't what?" He shifted Asher to one arm and reached out with his free hand, fingers barely brushing her cheek. "Can't notice how beautiful you are? Can't see how you've brought life back to these cold stone walls? Can't feel my wolf howling every time you walk away?" Kira's breath caught. This was madness. Kings didn't fall for servant girls, especially not Omega servant girls. The nobles will never accept it. They barely tolerate me caring for Asher. "The nobles can..." Darius started, then stopped himself. Even in moonlight madness, he couldn't speak treason aloud. Instead, he moved closer still, until she was trapped between his body and the garden wall. "Kira, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, drowning in golden fire. "I've tried to fight this," he whispered. "Tried to tell myself it's just gratitude, or loneliness, or grief playing tricks on my mind. But every day you're here, every smile you give my son, every song you sing in that beautiful voice, it breaks down another wall I built around my heart." Darius. His name was a prayer and a warning. I know it's impossible. I know the laws, the traditions, the expectations. His forehead touched hers, and she felt the tremor that ran through his powerful frame. But impossible things happen in moonlight, don't they? Asher cooed softly between them, tiny hands grasping both their fingers, connecting them in a circle that felt sacred and terrifying. "He needs you," Darius breathed against her lips. "We both do." "And I need you," Kira confessed, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "God help me. I need you both so much it frightens me." The kiss, when it came, was gentle as rainfall and devastating as lightning. Years of loneliness, months of careful distance, weeks of growing attraction, all of it poured into that single moment of connection. Kira felt her world shift on its axis, realigning around this impossible love. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back like a cold wave. "This changes everything," Kira whispered. "Or nothing," Darius replied, pain creeping back into his voice. "Tomorrow, Queen Regent Morgana arrives with the marriage contracts. Princess Helena and the Northern Treaty. My duty to the realm." The name hit Kira like a physical blow. She'd heard the whispers, the beautiful, powerful alpha princess who would be Darius's perfect queen. Everything Kira could never be. "Then this was goodbye," she said, stepping back. The loss of his warmth felt like winter settling in her bones. "No," Darius caught her hand. "This was a beginning. I don't know how, but I won't let them take you from us. I'll find a way." But even as he spoke the words, they both heard the hollow ring of desperate hope rather than certain promise. Dawn brought carriages thundering through the castle gates like harbingers of doom. Queen Regent Morgana had arrived early, and with her came Princess Helena's entire royal procession. Kira watched from the nursery window as servants scurried like ants, preparing for the formal announcement that would seal Darius's fate. Quite a spectacle, isn't it? Kira spun to find a woman in midnight blue silk, standing in the doorway, elegant, silver-haired, with eyes like winter storms. This had to be the Queen Regent herself. "Your Majesty." Kira dropped into the deepest curtsy she could manage while holding Asher. "So you're the little Omega who's caused such a stir." Morgana glided into the room, her gaze taking in everything: the comfortable rocking chair, the toys scattered on expensive carpets, the way Asher reached eagerly for Kira's face. "Impressive work, I must admit. 3 weeks of failure, then you arrive and suddenly the heir thrives." "I just give him what he needs," Kira said carefully. "And what might that be?" "Love. Attention. Someone who puts his needs before everything else." Morgana's smile was sharp as a blade. "How wonderfully simple. Tell me, child, what do you know of ruling kingdoms?" The question felt like a trap. "Nothing, Your Majesty. I'm just a baker's daughter." "Exactly." Morgana moved to the window, gazing down at the courtyard where Princess Helena was greeting the assembled nobles. See her? 26 years old, trained from birth in statecraft, fluent in 7 languages, commands respect from every alpha in the Northern Territories. She will make Darius an excellent queen. Each word was a nail in the coffin of last night's impossible dreams. Kira clutched Asher tighter, breathing in his familiar baby scent to steady herself. "I understand, Your Majesty." "Do you?" Morgana turned back, and her expression was almost gentle. "I'm not a cruel woman, Kira Moonwhisper. I see what you've done for this child, and I'm grateful. But sentiment cannot rule kingdoms. The Northern Treaty requires this marriage. Without it, we face war with 3 rival territories." The weight of it settled on Kira's shoulders like stones, thousands of lives hanging in the balance, all threatened by her selfish heart. "When do you want me to go?" she asked quietly. "Tonight, after the formal announcement." Morgana reached into her silk purse and withdrew a heavy leather pouch. Enough gold to start over anywhere you choose, a reward for your faithful service. The coins clinked like funeral bells. Kira stared at the pouch, seeing her future stretched out in lonely years ahead. No Asher's laughter, no Darius's rare smiles, no family to call her own. There's one condition, Morgana continued. You tell no one of your departure. Let the king believe it was your choice to leave quietly. It will be easier for everyone. You want me to break his heart to save his conscience. I want you to be wise enough to see that love alone cannot conquer politics. Morgana's voice softened slightly. You're young, child. You'll find love again. Build a life somewhere peaceful. This infatuation will fade. But even as she nodded agreement, Kira knew the Queen Regent was wrong. What she felt for Darius and Asher wasn't infatuation, it was the deep, bone-deep knowing that came when wolves found their pack. Leaving would tear out a piece of her soul that could never heal. The day crawled by like a death march. Kira went through the motions feeding Asher, singing to him, playing their usual games while her heart slowly broke into smaller pieces. She memorized every detail. His laugh when she made silly faces, the way he curled his fingers around hers, the complete trust in his bright eyes. As sunset painted the sky blood red, the great hall filled with nobility from across the kingdom, Kira could hear the music and laughter even from the nursery, celebrating Darius's engagement to a woman he'd never chosen. Kira? She turned to find Darius in the doorway, still wearing his formal coronation crown and royal robes. He looked magnificent and miserable in equal measure. How was the announcement? She asked, though her voice came out strangled. A performance. He entered the room and sank into the rocking chair beside her, suddenly looking older than his 30 years. Helena is everything a queen should be. Beautiful, intelligent, politically savvy. The nobles are thrilled. Good, Kira lied. That's good. Is it? Darius's golden eyes searched her face. Because I stood there accepting congratulations and felt like I was attending my own funeral. Darius, don't. I love you. The words exploded out of him like a dam bursting. I know it's insane and impossible and completely unfair to you, but I love you, Kira. Not just because you saved Asher, not just because you brought light back into this cursed place, but because when I look at you, I see home. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. I love you too, she whispered. I love you both so much I can barely breathe. Darius was beside her in an instant, pulling her into his arms while Asher babbled happily between them, oblivious to the adult's heartbreak. Run away with me, Darius said desperately. Tonight, we'll take Asher and disappear somewhere they'll never find us. For one shining moment, Kira let herself imagine it, a cottage in some distant village, raising Asher together, living as a simple family with simple dreams. But reality crashed back like a tidal wave. The Northern Treaty, she said. The war. Damn the treaty. Damn the war. Damn everything but this. He kissed her fiercely, pouring years of loneliness and desperate love into the connection. When they broke apart, Kira made the hardest choice of her life. I can't, she whispered. I won't let you abandon your people for me. You're a good king, Darius. The kingdom needs you more than I do. That's not true. It is. She stood on shaking legs, gently placing Asher in his father's arms. And someday, when you're older, you'll understand why I had to go. Darius stared at her in growing horror. Go? What are you talking about? Kira backed toward the door, each step an agony. I'm leaving tonight. It's better this way. No. Darius rose, still holding Asher. Kira, no. We'll find another way. There is no other way. The words came out harsher than she intended. You have duties I can never be part of. And her voice broke. I can't stay and watch you marry someone else. I'm not that strong. She reached the doorway and turned for one last look at the two males who owned her heart completely. Take care of each other, she whispered, and fled before her resolve could crumble entirely. But as she ran through the castle corridors toward an uncertain future, neither she nor Darius knew that their desperate love had already created a consequence that would change everything. The scent she carried was still too faint for even an alpha to detect, but life had taken root, a tiny miracle that would soon make their impossible situation even more complicated. The morning sun painted the great hall in golden light, but tension crackled through the air like lightning before a storm. Princess Helena stood at the altar in her silver wedding dress, waiting for a groom who couldn't stop staring at the servants' entrance. Kira appeared in the doorway, pale as moonlight, clutching Prince Asher to her chest as if her life depended on it. "Your Majesty," she whispered, but her voice carried across the silent hall. Every noble, every guard, every servant held their breath. Something was different about Kira today. Her scent had changed overnight, carrying a sweetness that made Darius's wolf pace restlessly beneath his skin. Elder Thorn stepped forward, his weathered face twisted with suspicion. "Why does the Omega dare interrupt the royal wedding?" His words dripped with disgust, but Kira didn't shrink away like she usually did. Instead, she lifted her chin with quiet dignity. "Because," she said softly, "the prince needs his breakfast, and I am still his caretaker." But as she spoke, that new scent grew stronger, filling the hall with something that made every werewolf present freeze in shock. Darius felt his knees go weak. He knew that scent. He had smelled it once before, when Celine carried Asher. The realization hit him like a physical blow, and his sharp intake of breath echoed through the hall. Princess Helena turned toward Kira, her nostrils flaring as she caught the scent too. Her perfect composure cracked. "Impossible," she breathed. "An Omega cannot carry an Alpha's child without being claimed." Queen Regent Morgana finished coldly, rising from her throne like a dark storm cloud. Her eyes blazed with fury as she looked between Darius and Kira. Someone explain this disgrace immediately. The hall erupted into chaos. Nobles gasped and whispered. Guards reached for their swords, unsure who to protect. Princess Helena's father, Alpha Duke Blackwater, roared his outrage so loudly that the crystal chandeliers shook. But through all the noise, Darius could only hear one thing: his son crying in Kira's arms. Without thinking, he stepped away from the altar, away from his duty, away from everything he was supposed to do. His feet carried him toward the woman who held his heart and his child. "Darius, stop!" Morgana commanded, but he didn't listen. He couldn't listen. Not when Kira looked so frightened, so alone in a room full of people who wanted to hurt her. "Guards, seize the Omega!" Elder Thorn shouted. "She has used dark magic to bewitch our king." But before anyone could move, something extraordinary happened. Ancient books flew from the castle library's shelves, floating through the air like birds. They landed open at Morgana's feet, their pages glowing with soft silver light. Words written in the old language danced across the parchment, rearranging themselves into readable text. A gasp rose from the crowd as they read the impossible truth. There, in bloodline records thought lost for centuries, was proof that shattered everything they believed they knew. "The Moon Whisper line," whispered the court historian, his voice shaking with disbelief. "They were the original royal family, before the Great War, before they were overthrown and scattered." His finger traced the glowing words. "The bloodline was thought extinct, but it wasn't," Kira said quietly, her voice steady now despite the tears streaming down her face. "My grandmother told me stories before she died. Stories about princesses who became bakers, about royal blood that learned to hide in plain sight." Morgana stared at the ancient texts, her face going white as freshly fallen snow. "If this is true," she said slowly, "then you're not just any Omega. You're a true-born princess," Darius finished, his voice filled with wonder. He reached Kira's side and gently touched her cheek. "My wolf knew. Even when I didn't understand, he knew you were meant to be mine." Princess Helena's wedding dress rustled as she stepped back, her political mind already working. "This changes everything," she said, though her voice held more relief than anger. "If Lady Kira is of royal blood, then your mating isn't forbidden. It's actually quite advantageous for both our kingdoms." But Elder Thorn wasn't finished with his protests. Royal blood or not, she's still presented as an Omega. The laws clearly state. The laws were written by men who feared what they didn't understand. Kira interrupted, and for the first time, everyone could hear the strength that had always lived inside her. "I may have presented as an Omega, but I am so much more than what others tried to make me." Prince Asher chose that moment to stop crying, looking up at all the adults with bright, curious eyes. He reached one tiny hand toward his father, then toward the woman who had become his mother in every way that mattered. Duke Blackwater cleared his throat. "Well," he said gruffly, "this is certainly more interesting than I expected when I woke up this morning." Spring had returned to the Northern Territories, and with it came the most beautiful wedding the kingdom had ever seen. Cherry blossoms fell like snow as Kira walked down the aisle, not in a servant's simple dress, but in a gown that sparkled like starlight. Her crown, the original Moon Whisper crown, found in the castle's deepest vaults, caught the sunlight and sent rainbows dancing across the happy faces of everyone watching. Darius waited for her at the altar, holding Prince Asher in his arms. The baby was healthy and strong now, laughing and reaching for the flower petals that drifted on the warm breeze. When Kira reached them, Asher immediately stretched his arms toward her, and she gathered him close with a smile that could have powered the sun. "You saved us both," Darius whispered as they stood together, finally where they belonged. "No," Kira replied softly. "We saved each other." The ceremony was everything their first attempted wedding wasn't. Full of joy instead of duty, love instead of politics, hope instead of fear. When they kissed, sealing their bond before gods and kingdom alike, even the flowers seemed to bloom brighter. But the real magic happened afterward, during the celebration feast. Princess Helena approached them with a genuine smile, her earlier disappointment replaced by something that looked like friendship. "I have a confession," she said, accepting a glass of wine from a passing servant. "I never wanted to marry for duty either. There's a young alpha in my father's court who makes my heart race every time he enters a room." She raised her glass in a toast, to following our hearts instead of our fears. Elder Thorne, looking uncomfortable but determined, stepped forward next. "Your Majesty," he said stiffly to Kira, "I owe you an apology. I let old prejudices blind me to your true worth. You have proven yourself a worthy queen, and I would be honored to serve you faithfully." Kira's response surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of accepting his formal apology with cold politeness, she reached out and gently touched his arm. "We all make mistakes, Elder Thorne. What matters is learning from them and doing better." As the evening wore on, more and more people approached the royal couple with stories of their own. Servants spoke of love matches they'd hidden for years. Young nobles admitted they'd always felt different from what society expected. Omegas, betas, and alphas alike shared dreams they'd kept secret, afraid to hope for more than tradition allowed. Queen Regent Morgana, watching it all from her seat at the high table, found herself smiling for the first time in years. "Perhaps," she murmured to Duke Blackwater, "it's time our laws caught up with our hearts." The biggest surprise came when Kira stood to address the crowd. Her pregnancy was just beginning to show, and she placed one protective hand over the small bump as she spoke. "When I was a little girl working in my family's bakery," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the hall, "I used to dream about fairy tales, stories where the servant girl became a princess, where love conquered all obstacles, where everyone got their happily ever after." She paused, looking around at all the faces, watching her with such hope and affection. "I thought those were just stories, pretty lies to help children sleep better at night. But standing here now, holding my son and carrying my husband's child, surrounded by people who've become my family, I realized something important." Her voice grew stronger, filled with the confidence of a woman who had finally found her place in the world. "Fairy tales aren't lies, they're promises. Promises that good things can happen to people who keep believing, who keep fighting for what's right, who refuse to let others tell them they're not good enough." She raised her glass, sparkling with apple cider instead of wine. "So here's to all of us. To every person who ever felt small or different or not quite right for the role they were given. Your story isn't over. Your fairy tale is just beginning." The cheer that rose from the crowd was deafening. People laughed and cried and hugged each other, feeling for the first time that maybe, just maybe, they could write their own happy endings too. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the castle had settled into peaceful quiet, Darius and Kira sat together in the nursery. Prince Asher slept soundly in his crib, one small fist wrapped around a wooden toy wolf that Kira had carved for him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't answered my call for a wet nurse?" Darius asked, brushing a strand of hair from Kira's face. She leaned into his touch, her hand resting over their unborn child. "Every day," she admitted. "But then I remember that some things are meant to be. You needed someone to save your son. I needed somewhere to belong. Asher needed a mother who would love him unconditionally." She smiled up at her husband, her mate, her king. And maybe the kingdom needed to learn that strength comes in many different forms. Outside their window, the first stars of evening appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled their ancient songs of family and belonging and love that conquers all. It was the sound of a kingdom healing, of old wounds finally closing, of new beginnings taking root like flowers in well-tended soil. Their story had started with desperate need and impossible circumstances, but it would continue with hope, with love, and with the unshakable belief that everyone deserves their chance at a fairy tale ending. No matter how humble their beginning, no matter what others might say about their worth,